Thought I'd do a quick midweek video and run through this new suspension setup I've got, just because a lot of people have been curious and asking questions about it. And as you would have seen on recent videos, the Nav has a bloody lot of travel in the rear now. It can flex. The car is a Nissan Navara D23. It's 2019 ST. In regards to suspension axle setup, they are independent front suspension in the rear, which means you got your diff, and then independent of your diff are your steering arms and CVs. So they work basically independently of each. Well, look at that, doesn't help anyone. I don't know why I'm doing that. Maybe it does. They work independently of the diff. So one side can go up and down and the other side can go up and down separately. Whereas in the rear of these, they're a solid axle, which means the whole diff and axles and everything is one big thing, so it all moves together up and down. Basic outline of that is your solid axles are generally a hell of a lot stronger compared to your weaker IFS setups. I was stuck with a 2-inch lift in this car, which is perfect, like a nice basic moderate setup. I can fit 33s under there, so for me it was like, what lift do I need to go to fit 33s? Because your lift will only lift your body up, whereas then you actually need the bigger wheels to get that proper ground clearance to lift up like your diffs and your axles and get everything that's underneath up that bit higher. 2-inch lift means it keeps it legal. I'm not having problems with getting defected with the police and then having to engineer things. It also kept it a bit cheaper because you didn't have to do a whole heap of things to lift your car 2-inch. You know, going any more than 2-inch lift in the front means you have to extend different lines and that. You have to get a diff drop in the front, otherwise you're just going to break CVs. I've never broken a CV in this car, and I've done a hell of a lot of tough off-roading, so, you know, 33s and the 2-inch lift seem to work pretty well for that. It's not really drastically increasing breakages or anything. And the suspension lift is to handle more weight. So if I just had kept the standard suspension on, there's no way it would handle all these modifications that I have. They're sort of the big things why you get new suspension for a four-wheel drive. Give it a bit more clearance to fit your bigger tyres and for handling your weight, plus the toughness of them. So if you're doing, you know, remote trips, like we've just been up the Cape, doing big trips and stuff like that, your factory suspension is gonna probably go very, very quickly on corrugations and tough off-road stuff. It's not set up the same way aftermarket gear is. I don't know why I'm down here because you can't actually see anything while I'm trying to talk to the camera, but the suspension setup in the front, well, my original suspension setup was a Ironman 2-inch foam cell pro lift kit, which I've been quite happy with, and that's what continues to be in the front. So you got, let me see if I can actually show you. So you got the foam cell pro shocks with your coil overs over them. That's in the front, 2-inch lift. And I've also got some adjustable upper control arms, which help with those wheel alignments and your camber and that. And they can help with getting your alignments correct to actually fit 33s. They're the Super Pro ones. Probably wouldn't get them ones again because the ball joint went on one of them. Probably have to replace both of those. Because you can't actually re-grease these ball joints, so they just go eventually. Well, I just noticed when I'm down here, I'll smash my guard in there as well. Perfect, more damage. Also, while we're talking Navaras and lifts and that, these are a 33-inch tyre. They're a 285/75 R16. And the rim offset is a positive 20. And with all that set up, the 2-inch lift and the adjustable up control arms and that all fits perfectly. I didn't need to do any chopping or anything at all. But you just saw then it's scraping on that guard. But I don't know if that's because that guard is loose, or it might have just been because we're up the Cape and it took some few like big in the front end, which probably smacked that tyre up in there a bit. But it doesn't actually like rub here or anything at all on full lock and stuff. So that's the suspension set up in the front. As I said, being independent front suspension, you're just not going to get a whole heap of travel from it. When I did this rear setup, which I'll get to in a sec, I could have done the front too to get some more down travel. The problem was then when it's fully drooped, when you're climbing up a rock or something, then as it comes down, that CV angle is increased. So you're just like then more likely to break things in the front, really. That's the problem with increasing all that travel in the front. And as I said, you're not going to get that much anyway. That's why your big solid axle patrols and cruisers and that are so good, like those solid axles all around, because you just get so much flex out of them. And they're strong. When you got solid axles front and rear, like it's strong stuff underneath them. Now down the back, this is where it gets interesting, and this is where all that new travel and the suspension setups come from. It has taken a few goes and a few adjustments of various things and that to get it right, and I'm still not quite there. There's still one or two things I need to do. But I started out at where Dad got his locker installed. I did film a bit there on the day. Momentum 4x4 in Warhope. So Todd there helped again. So yeah, pulled what was out of there, which is the Ironman setups, the Ironman coils, and because these are coil rear, they're not leaf springs like most utes, these are a coil rear. Pull the coils and the shocks out, and then put the new setup in. So the new setup came actually from these guys, Platinum Mechanical and Suspension. So the new setup is a long travel kit. It is they're Outback Armour shocks, but they're customized by Platinum Mechanical and Suspension. So you can't actually buy them straight from Outback Armour. They're 700mm shocks, and then the kit comes with a few other bits and pieces. Came with some coil retainers, extended braided brake lines, obviously the shocks. I think there was a few little other bits and pieces there and things you need to do. One of the first problems we had was, thought the springs were going to be okay with the coil retainers and that. They gave us like your drop down coil retainer cones, and then you bolt the coil on the bottom. But my old springs were not long enough even with the coil retainers, so we had to do a bit of mucking around and make some extensions for the coil retainers, and just to get me by for the moment. But
You're gonna need longer coils, eh? What I'll have to do is get out the bennets, and I'll get a bit of round pipe, weld the bottom in, weld the top in, weld a nut to the top, weld a nut to the bottom so that screws into it.
Yeah.
And the top one, well, this top plate will screw into the top section. To me, that's a lot better.
yeah, you got a couple of inch overlap there.
Yeah.
So even if you take a big knock and things, one wheel goes flying sort of up or down, goes down, it's not just going to pop out. Moment, but there was just too much like space there where the coil was actually being released. Once it started to flex, coil would be released, and even though it was held in by the retainer and spacer and everything, there's just too much free movement there of your coil. And when your coil's not actually working with your suspension properly as it flexes, it's not really doing what it should be, which is like holding the force and pushing like the tire down onto the ground and stuff. The tire's kind of nearly like flapping around a bit because you haven't got that coil to hold that tension, so it's not going to help you as much off-road. But we did get it on the day and got it all working. I drove it out the bush and tested on a couple of like flex ramp things, and I was just like, what is happening? The first time I was like blown away. I think I took a little video on that day, so I'll put that up. We got it all in and sorted, I think. Just come for a quick test drive now. We'll test it on this mount here, and there's definitely a lot of travel in the rear. I'm just seeing if it's all gonna work. It's definitely gonna make a big difference on the tracks. Just like, what am I gonna brake here? And then that's tucked so far up in, and everything else seems okay. I'm just like, that's a lot. A ridiculous amount more than what I had before. Gonna have to try and crawl under here in the dirt and show you what's going on. Oh, well, too old for this at 30. So here's obviously a big Outback Armour 700mm shocks. And then the coil sits separately. So what we ended up doing was I looked around a heap for some new springs that would work. This is a little bit hard with this setup. So I got some PSR 3-inch flexi coils at the rear, which were rated to 300 kilos. to handle like the tray and canopy and that. And then because I think there's a slight bit more weight than that on them, it just sits them down a little bit. But I think the rear does sit slightly higher than the front at the moment, but springs normally sag and wear over time a bit. So give it a little bit of time for that to sort of sit down a bit. But it means there's a heap of travel in them and they can work through the full length of the flex. They're held in by a bolt down there, and then you got your coil retainer up the top, so they can't actually pop out. Now these are that's my diff breather. That's the extended braided brake line. The only thing with these, like, I don't know what I'm going to do, because it kind of knocks in various places. Like, and these are braided, so they're very strong. They're not like your standard brake lines. I'm just going to have to keep a bit of an eye on that, as it does knock a bit in a few places for any potential rubbing. So that side's worse than that side. This side's alright, just because of how the brackets are set up on these cars. We try to bend them a bit to get them to sit as best we could, but not really a heap we can do there. The shocks bolt straight in, so butt up down the bottom and up the top there. You don't actually need to do anything with them. You need to do a few bits and pieces, so this has to get taken off. I think you can actually get an extended bracket for that, which is your front headlight alignment or sensor or something. Like, headlights still work fine with it. I don't exactly know what it does, to be honest, but we've undone that. Otherwise, it just snaps off your bracket there, but I might get an extended bracket so that can be reattached and stay on. This black one here is my diff lock line. I just had to pull that out of one of its brackets, otherwise it was stretching too much. I think that's about the main things underneath. Under here I've also got a big adjustable, stronger pan hard rod. That's another thing I've done to the suspension. And these rear trailing arms, I think they're Roadrunner ones. They're nice big strong ones, because your factory ones are like thin and weak, and I just smashed them to pieces on rocks. What I think I might do is drive it onto a little bit of a mound there. I won't put it on full flex, but at least we'll be able to see underneath a bit better this stuff I want to show. Okay, I've just sort of smashed it in here to some ruts and mud, but up onto the bank here. And yeah, as you can see, I think that is just about full travel. As you can see, there's plenty of travel there, but now we can actually see better what's going in here. So with these ABS lines, we just ended up, in the end, a bit of adjusting around, trying to a few different things. We just moved them slightly along to give more travel here, and then just unhooked it out of this clip there. So then it's still on its line there, and it's not rubbing. There's obviously spring when it's flexed out. You can see your brake line there, still got travel. There's obviously your shock. And here's one of the problems that I've still got to do, is I got to extend the bump stops. You can see there's a bit of rubbing. The only other thing would be to bring the offsets of the rims out, which I don't really want to do, because then you got to get flares, and then you got your tires sitting further out, which can stress like wheel bearings and stuff like that. So it might just be those bump stops and some playing around with those brake lines. Those springs seem to be working really well. The other thing underneath, which is going to be way too hard to get in under there and show, but had to modify the tail shaft cross member a little bit. Otherwise the tail was going to nudge that on full flex. And there's the other side tucking up in there pretty hard. It does hit the wheel arches a bit on the train canopy. When I extend those bump stops, that will help, yeah. So extend those bump stops, and that'll help with the train canopy rub and the chassis rub. So it should still get the down travel, it just won't hit as high up. That's about it, I think. As I said, it's from Platinum Mechanical and Suspension. So I guess like ask them if you have questions, or if you're interested in the same kit getting the travel, because it does make a massive difference off-road. Like, it definitely makes the car more capable. Just having that travel and that flex to work your way through all the terrain, it's amazing. Hopefully that answers everyone's questions. If you got any more, let me know, and we'll end it there. That's how to get monster flex out of your D23 Navara or Ute.